All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the internet. We are here for our monthly interview and performance series at the Museum of Glass in Tacoma, Washington. And today we have the distinct pleasure of having the wonderful saxophonist and flautist and bassoonist and clarinetist and scat vocalist extraordinaire, wonderful teacher and educator, the great Tracy Knoop with us again. Tracy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Kareem.
Yeah. Before we get going here, again, we'd like to thank our sponsors that make this possible. So, again, that's the Museum of Glass, KNKX, Ted Brown Music, Tacoma Creates, Titusville Cars, and Edward Jones financial consultant Rick Gray. So thank you for their support, which makes this, again, free and open to the public, and very happy to be able to do this. This is... I'm trying to think which. We've done several interviews already. If this is the brand new interview that you've seen with Tracy, we've done several in the past. If you go on YouTube and look up my name and Tracy's name, you'll find it. But there's lots of great concerts that we've done in the past, as well as backstory, sordid past and history, and all of everything in between. So, Tracy, I was thinking about what to discuss today, and we can certainly go and backtrack on lots of other things because there's plenty of things to talk about. I want to talk about, there was a club here in Tacoma that maybe some people know about, maybe they don't, called Red Kelly's. And Red was a bassist with Woody Herman for many years, as well as Red Norvo's trio and Frank Sinatra.
Lots of the big bands. Mm-hmm.
So if you've lived in Tacoma for any amount of time, you probably know about this club and its history. If not, check it out. There's quite a bit of information at the main library here in Tacoma. And you can also Google Red Kelly and read about him as a bassist and a musician. But can you talk about... how you met Red and your experience with him over the years?
Yeah, well, I was probably a senior in high school. So Red's was a club, but it was also a restaurant. His wife ran the restaurant part of it, Donna. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I, pretty much knew my musical path. And so I was always looking to go find local players to listen to or to take lessons with or to find out information about. And I don't remember how I stumbled upon the club Red's name itself, but someone had hit me to it, and I would start to show up on occasion, when guys like, so many people, Bill Ramsey and Corky Corcoran when I was a kid. He was towards the end of his life then. Just local talent, really. I would go in and listen and try to pick their brains, and they were very welcoming. They didn't know who I was. I was just a young kid trying to play the saxophone. And I met Red and Donna, at that point in my life. And then, went to Berklee School of Music, came back, and then, was allowed to come in and play on occasion with the Cats. And Tacoma, at that time really had... people, unknown heroes, that were just great players. Guys that just had day jobs that were just great players. But Rams had a day job, he for many years. Because oddly enough, playing the saxophone doesn't always pay the bills on time. But I was introduced to Reds at that point. Mm-hmm.
Well, historically speaking, from my understanding, and again, this is a little before my time, but a Reds club was originally in Tumwater.
That's correct.
That was the original location. So when you first met him, the location had moved to Tacoma at that point?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so this
so
was...
I never was a part of the one down in Tumwater, but yeah.
So this was 1970s? 80s?
No, this was like 1979. Mm-hmm.
I was one.
You were one.
I was one. All right. Well, so when I've had my own via you and through Bill Ramsey, that's how I met Red. And I have my own stories about Red, my own interactions and wonderful fond memories. But so how did you first meet Red? What was it like when you first? Did you know of his reputation as a musician first?
I knew just from other musicians telling me that he'd played with a lot of big bands and people that I had started to listen to. Gosh, it's hard to remember when I first met him. I'm not sure if I remember that exactly. But I do remember him always being very inviting, very funny. And they used to have a lunch that was once a week where all the local cats would come and hang out, and Red would hold court and tell lots of hilarious stories. I wish I could remember all of them because he was just riotous. And they would allow me to come down and sit in, and I'd kind of sit at the end of the table and just really observe and just watch. was a little shy to put my 2 cents in at that point because I was young and just happy to be listening to these cats talk about all their musical stories. Because they really had done the real thing. I mean, I was just on the very end of all that road stuff, and I was at the very end of it, and lucky to have had that. But these guys lived, during when it was really, that's how you could go out and make a living. You went out on the road. I mean, like, and it was so cool because like when guys would come through town, I mean, so many people, but Med Flory and Bud Shank and I mean, so many people, they would always go to Red's. That was the place to go because Red knew all those guys. He lived with them on the road.
I can remember when I was working the door, I'd work the door and take the money for you and also for Bill Ramsey. And I remember Rams one time, like any time folks that knew Bill that were from his association with the Count Basie Band, if they were in town, they would stop and sit in and play.
They would.
And I remember trombonist Kime.
Dave Kime?
Dave Kime, yeah. I remember him coming in. He just got off the road, and he came in and played, and it was unbelievable playing.
Yeah. Yeah, I played with Dave a lot with Bill Sheehan, Tuxedo Junction. Well, you played with the band. Dave used to play before he went on the road with Basie. Dave was the trombone player in the band. We played a lot.
And aside, you mentioned something that I think is important for people to understand, and I'll just relate a story. We used to play this concert series in Seattle in the late 90s, early 2000s. It's this little club called the Hop Vine. We played there every week for a couple years. It was myself, Julian McDonough on drums, and Willie Blair on bass. And one of our teachers, we was going to Cornish College of the Arts at the time, and one of our teachers was Julian Priester. Now, Julian, many people already know his reputation that precedes him, but he had played with Johnny Griffin, Max Roach, Freddie Hubbard, everybody.
Yep.
And he came out to play and hang out. Didn't have to, but he did, just to be supportive. And on the microphone, I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for local trombonist Julian Priester." Well, on the break, he took me outside and very nicely said, "Hey, please don't do that again." I said, "What? I didn't mean to offend." He said, "Don't call me a local musician, because when you say that, it in the mind of people that don't know, it takes away the value of you as a musician."
Oh,
which that thought didn't occur to me, and I totally understand where he's coming from, and it makes sense to me. But to your point, we're very blessed in this region. Yes, we're local musicians, but we've done so much and played. Yourself and all the people that came before have done all these amazing things, and it's just the way that we view language. When people say that, it kind of just takes the value out of that.
I guess it could in a way. It's the music community across the country. To most people, may seem like this vast thing, but really, it's a very small world. You talk with people that are touring nationally, or just people living and playing locally. It seems like we all sort of know the same people in some way or another. So this idea of, sorry kids, but if you got big eyes to become famous, jazz might not be the answer, but it's a beautiful family that's vast and usually very welcoming. I know it has been for me. Thank God, yeah.
Well, I think it's the separation between music itself as an art form that everybody loves and loves everything about it, and then there's the music business aspect of it and how people think about that and perceive it, whether it's true or not, making it more or less a marketable thing, which is part of the nature of it, I suppose. So
yeah, the difficult part, I would say. Yeah.
Yes. Well, since our last interview,
yes,
it's been a minute, but our well-known and dear friend Bill Ramsey has passed on. Can you maybe talk about how you originally met Bill?
Sure, I know exactly. I remember the first time I met him, I was playing at a club called Blocks, and it was on Broadway, right across from the old Ted Brown Music store, and I was on break from school, I think. Yes. And I booked a gig there, and I think I had Alan Youngblood on piano, Steve Bentley on drums, and I can't remember who was playing bass, Jeff Johnson, but I was up there playing, and I see this very tall man walk in, got a black coat on, as he walks towards the back of the room to sit down. I see on the back of his his jacket says the Count Basie Orchestra. Now I see this, and I'm like, I start to get dry mouth, and my hands start shaking. I'm like, oh God, what am I gonna do now? Play better, play better. And on the break, he came up and says, "You sound pretty good, kid. My name's Bill Ramsey." And I mentioned to him, that I was just here on break, and I grew up here. And he says, "Yeah, I kind of heard about you a little bit." And I remember calling him after that initial meeting and saying, "I can't even believe I said this to him. If you ever need a lead alto player, call me." Now he was the lead alto player. He's not going to call me. I mean, I'm looking back how foolish. But he did call me, and there used to be there used to be a Tacoma Musicians Union, and they had a big band. And the first gig I played with him was at this is big, the Ording Old Soldiers Home. And with all these much older than me guys, and Rams is playing, I think, tenor. And people don't know that about Rams, but he was a really good tenor player. He really was. And that was the first time I got to play with him. And all these old guys are tapping me on the shoulder, going, "Come on, kid." I won't share too much more than that. But that's the first time I played with him. Yeah. And we just became great friends. I always admired his alto sound when he played lead alto, and his playing in general. He was kind of the guy. At least one of them for sure, and always, willing to help and reach out. And without him, I wouldn't be where I am today, whatever that is, whatever that means. Him and Frankie were like second parents, and Frankie still is, and we miss him greatly for sure.
Well, we did that. For those that aren't aware, we did a concert for him. It was last April, which you can watch online, and it's in the span of I think 3 hours. But even then, saying everything that needs to or should be said doesn't. So I mean, this is kind of a time you can share some more stories about that now.
That was
I
a
suppose.
difficult day because we were on stage playing. My mother died that day, and I had to leave. And oh God, yeah, it's been a rough year that way. We've lost a lot of great people this past year. But it's the course of life. I mean, when it comes down to it, we're all sort of terminal in some way. I mean, so. But yeah, I think the greatest thing about that is, and maybe something to remember about people that you really care about, is let them know why they're alive. And I know Rams didn't want to have any sort of memorial service, and Frankie, I know I've spoke with her. And there's just not really, that's not something in the cards for them. They don't think it's necessary. But yeah, I think let them know why they're alive.
Well, I think those that knew Bill, and of course we're here to talk about you, but also your associations
yeah, let's talk about him. Yeah.
But folks that knew Bill, I mean, and got to spend any considerable amount of time with him, and really not in just like the capacity of like a passing thing, but get to play gigs and know him as a musician or as a human being. His personality was larger than life. He could light up a room. I mean, that's not to be cliche, but
no, he would.
Definitely life of the party. And
yes.
And part of that is just because of his personality, but also he lived all these things. He was just retelling or recounting things.
It's great to talk about. One of the greatest things about him and other Chuck Stenson, these. I would say, Rams, did you ever get to hear Bird play live? And he's like, yeah, I saw him at the Evergreen Ballroom. I'm like, wow. Because, you hear the recordings, and in those days, Bird was only recorded in stereo a few times. So I said, what was his sound like? He said, oh, it was beautiful. And you could ask him about anybody, and he'd say, yeah, I played with him. Yeah, I saw him. All these people that, are your heroes that were gone, and the only, access you have to them is recordings. Rams knew these guys. He played with them. So, I mean, it was like school.
Well, the other thing, through, I think that's just my opinion from the same kind of situation, playing with you guys in Tuxedo Junction and being the young guy in the bandstand and being able to observe all these personalities and mannerisms and playing firsthand, and then later on becoming a musician and playing and leading bands. and maybe I'm wrong with this, I don't feel that I am, in my own personal opinion. It seems that the scene is different. It seems like it's not as welcoming, not as embracing. There's not as many older musicians, that you don't have that sense of camaraderie. I don't feel that. And again, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm curious about your opinion.
I think it's secular. I think at that time, again, you were just on the really very end of all that. There was a bigger, larger, just number-wise, nucleus of older musicians, and there was more gigs. And so you got to see them, you hang out, you know. I mean, when I first got off the road in, I don't know, 95? No, it might have been earlier than that. I mean, I was working, there was months I had 20 gigs in a month. I mean, and that actually paid money. Yeah. You can go out and hustle that many gigs now, maybe, but it's not the same. It's not like the phone ringing, hey, I need you to play, hey, I need you to play. Now it's like, hey, can I come play? Hey, can I come play? Hey, can I book my band? In those days, there was work. I mean, and it seems like enough for everybody. So I think that's part of it. I think there's a younger group of people coming up that sort of have their own mold on it, that maybe you and I don't see right now, but I think it's, I hope, rejuvenating. And as much as it kills me to say, as an older musician now, it's sort of up to us to, and you do it all the time, create a space for them so that it's like planting seeds, you know, annual plants, not perennials. You know, hopefully that it grows and continues to grow, because that's the only way this music's going to stay alive. In the digital world that we live, I mean, does anybody even own CDs anymore? You know, but presenting live music, as I believe, really jazz, really, I guess any music, art should be presented.
I guess along with that, I guess what I'm speaking to is, you know, I remember coming up and watching you and watching Bill play, or being on the bandstand with Buddy Catlett, or even if their personalities were cantankerous, or maybe, you know,
in today's world they would be considered that.
Yeah,
for
or
sure.
someone like Bob Nixon, genius player, but I've seen things that are up on the bandstand.
Yeah. Yep.
But even so, being around older musicians like that, the feeling that I got being around them is they were very open and sharing with the music, and very positive and supportive. And I don't feel like the music scene now, at least here in the general Pacific Northwest, Seattle area, is like that. There are a few exceptions, and there's a lot of talk about it, but I don't feel that it's the same. And what I'm curious your thoughts.
It could be. It could be. I just think, you know, everybody, it's just a different world that we live in, for sure, to say the least. And everybody's vying for their own spot. And maybe this is how the business part, which I was never very good at, still am not very good at, kind of works now. Instead of, you know, acknowledging someone's, I don't know, greatness musically, maybe you grab onto their their shoulder and say, hey, look at me with this guy, or this gal, or this person. It's a tough question. I hope you're wrong.
I do too.
I really
I just
hope you're
noticed the
wrong.
difference. I just noticed the difference.
You're out there playing a lot more than I am these days. You've probably got a better feel of it.
Maybe the difference too was, you know, the internet came in at the end of that. So now
Right.
with social media
It's a
and
whole
all of
different-
the
right, it's a
the
whole
good
different-
and or bad.
I know that's very well said. I mean, but I, you know, was starting to play gigs. There was no, there was no internet. I didn't even have a cell phone. I swore I would never get one. I mean, this is, I'm aging myself right before your very eyes, but it's true. The world's changed a lot, even just in the last 25 years, and swing ding-a-ling hasn't changed. I mean, it's still the feel is, you know, but the whole community process, business, of course, it's changed in many ways. It's probably, it's passed me by. I've been lucky in my life, and gotten to do a lot of things, and a lot of them don't exist anymore. So maybe that's what makes people not want to give their little piece of the turf up, or I don't know. Possible. But the music should be above all that, for sure. There's room for everybody in the world, I think. Yeah.
I agree. Well, from your perspective, because not only are you teaching, 90 students a week? It's a lot.
I'm not quite there anymore. I can't do that anymore.
Well, what's the number? Where are you now?
I don't know, 70.
Okay, still a lot.
Yeah.
So between doing that, and you've been doing that now for decades, probably at least since the 90s, 30 years? 30 years?
Yep.
And so you private lessons individually, and students of all ages from
8 to 80.
Yeah, so for lack of a better term, cradle to grave, right?
Yep.
And then also too with University of Puget
I
Sound.
directed the jazz orchestra there.
And how many years now?
I think 10.
10 years. So you see all these students progressing from learning how to play to becoming professional musicians and beyond.
And I have, yeah.
Yeah, so looking at that and seeing, because you've had many students go on to become professional musicians, what's the outlook now, in your opinion, for students that actually say, "Hey, Trace, I want to play," and then they actually go out and do it?
Yeah, and so, in teaching privately, very rarely would I say to a student, "I think you should pursue music as a course of living, making your livelihood." But when a student does say to me, "Do you think I should?" I say, "Well, ask them a couple questions. Do you feel like you can absolutely not live without it? Like, is it the number one thing in your life that makes you as happy as anything you can think of?" If the answer is yes, maybe. And students, it's different. Even from when you grew up, it's different. These students are, maybe it's just the evolution of education or the maturation of education. But they're broader and smarter. And I think we talked about this the last time. Some of them are so very, very talented in many ways that they can do a lot of things. I was only given them one thing, and I barely got it. But they're more balanced, and they're interested in having that balance. Yeah, they might want to pursue music. They might want to pursue other things. They might want to be able just to have every weekend off. Well, if you want every weekend off, don't become a musician. But they have so many resources, and I've got students that are, 12, 13 that play so well beyond what I could do when I was 12 or 13, for lots of reasons. I think everything just speeds up with time. And the technology that they have. You can remember transcribing probably off of cassette tape. Try it off of a record. There's no slowing down. There's no number mark. Just that alone. When I wanted to hear something new, I'd have to save my dollars that I would earn mowing lawns or whatever, stealing it out of my mom's pocket, and go to a record store. And, it was like $12 for a record. Now you just go right online and everything you want's there. It's great. So the ones that want to pursue music, I also see them being broader musically, like able to cover maybe not one thing, the greatest, but more things greatly, more types of music. Like if someone calls me to play a funk gig, I'm like, I better give you the number of some other people because I don't think you really want me to do that. I don't feel like, and it's not that I don't love that music. I do. It's great. It's just not what I play well. There are players out there that can do that, and they kind of can cover it all. I can play flute and clarinet. They can't, but those days are sort of gone too. Doubling, you don't need to double anymore. Not really, unless you're going to go work on Broadway on a show. I got friends that do that, and they're amazing at it. But around here these days, just living in one area, big bands. I guess if you're going to play in a swing band, you got to play clarinet. But it's just so different. So these students, are I think they have a broader palette as far as the music they play. I think that's the thing, and maybe that's a good thing, you know.
Well, and also too, talking about what you're saying with big bands or studio work or Broadway, the incentive used to be there because there was a lot of work for it,
Right.
and now there is no work for
Right.
it. So
So
then
what's
the incentive to do
There
it?
is none. There is none. No, there is none unless you just really love those instruments. I mean, when I was in high school, you know, I mean, my band director said, if you want to go out and do this, you got to learn to play flute, and you got to learn to play clarinet, and you got to be able to double. I mean, plus the fact that I was bored of playing saxophone in concert bands, you know, so I would learn clarinet because that was more fun. It seemed flute was more fun. Oh well, but yeah, the incentive. Yeah, that's exactly right. There's no need to.
Well, as we're solving the world's problems here. The other thing, if we think about this, you know, we talk about having this broad scope of music. Jazz, for lack of a better term, or whatever we want to call it. I mean, that word has negative connotations to it, too.
Does.
Spontaneous composition.
There you go.
If you look at folks that helped build this music, we talk about Lester Young from the saxophone sense, or Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, Sonny Rollins, Sonny Stitt. They didn't have to really deal with funk. That came later, and many of them died before that even was a thing. So they just had to deal with swing, you know,
That's
or
right.
bebop,
Yep.
you know. And so they became, you know, at the time, John Coltrane died, he was mid-30s, right? Charlie Parker,
Charlie
same
Parker.
thing, you know, and the
Great
amount of,
solo,
the amount of stuff that they were able to do and learn because they were just focusing on that one thing as opposed to, I need to be able to play bluegrass, I need to be able to play funk, I need to be able to play rock. They just
Right.
focused on the things that they were doing.
It was the music of the day. I mean, Charlie Parker played in, you know, Jamie Shan's band. Basically, it was a dance band. You know, I mean, but it had this element of swing to it, you know, and you know, like if you were during the big band era, if you were like played 27th trumpet in the trumpet section, you were famous. You were a rock star because it was the music of the day. So they, you know, they grew up with that, and then you know the hip young guy, you know, Bird and Dizzy, and you know they embraced the improvisational part of that, you know, and you know thusly broke away and created, you know, the pre-bebop part of improvisational music, which I rather call it that than jazz because that's what it is to me. And that was, people even danced to that at the beginning because it still went ting, 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 ting. And it's interesting. You talk about, you know, older musicians being more embracing. Well, in some ways, yes, but in some ways, no. I mean, the bebop guys, they were tired of playing in the mood for, pardon me for saying, just for a bunch of affluent white people. And so they would, you know, very commonly take a standard tune like Cherokee. Listen to the words to that song sometime. Oh, boy. Oh, man. And rewrite the melody and call it something completely different. So if these big band players that thought they were stars would come up and say, "Can I sit in?" And they would go, "Sure. Do you want to play Coco?" They're like, "Well, I don't know that well. You know, go learn it and come back." You know, and it was just Cherokee. And so they sort of wanted to spread away from all that conformative music that was, you know, making some people a lot of money, but not necessarily musicians.
I think for musicians know what you're talking about. Maybe
They
the
do.
general person doesn't necessarily know what you're talking about. Contrafacts, and that's
Oh, yeah,
where
yeah.
one. And I wasn't there at the time. This is stuff that I've read and heard. I mean, with bebop, if you look at bebop, the progression from bebop or to bebop from the swing era, tempos got a lot faster.
Yes, they did.
And they started adding more chord changes to it to make it like, look, we want to play this music at a high level, and if you want to do this, you need to come up to our level. We're not going
That's
to
right.
lower the bar, but we're going to raise the bar.
That's correct, I
And I
think.
think there's something to be said for that because not only it wasn't just doing it to make it hard,
No.
but it was high level artistry.
It was, and the music grew, and their ears grew. You know, Monk and Bud Powell, and you know, Duke and Mingus, and they were writing. I mean, when someone asks me who's your favorite American composer, I'm like, well, you know, Mingus, Duke Ellington. They're like, no, composer. I'm like, yeah, that's what I just said. you know, I mean, they are America's classical composers. I mean, and I don't mean like classical music in the traditional sense of classical music. There are composers, and people, you know, they don't. I mean, there's lots more than just those two, but like that's how I look at it.
Well, speaking to what you said also too, if they wanted to record Cherokee, well, if they went into the studio and recorded it because it was copywritten, they'd have to pay mechanical royalties on that. They have to pay money to play that song.
That's right.
Where if they wrote their own melodies on top of these existing things, you can't copyright a chord progression, but you can copyright melodies. So if they wrote their own melody, they'd get to keep all the money when they recorded it.
That's
So
right.
that's another big part of it too.
Big part of it too. Yeah, I mean, you know, you look at guys like, I don't know, like Hank Mobley, wrote so many great tunes, recorded so many great albums, and you would think a guy like him, you know, by the time he was 60, would have been pretty comfortable, but he wasn't because they didn't pay him. They didn't pay him. I mean, $50 a recording session. And he ended up dying on the streets of Philadelphia, basically homeless. And this is one of the people, the greatest guy, saxophone players, composers, that people, you know, who knows about Hank Mobley? Well, we do, but, you know.
I think the term is a musician's musician.
I think that's right, yeah.
Yeah, and it's
Oh,
unfortunate.
boy.
Yeah. That's the thing. I mean, that's the conundrum that I guess we're.
Yeah. So how do you encourage a young person to go be like that,
right?
And not realize, well, but if I go, you know, into tech, I can actually make a living, and I know lots of I don't know 30-year-olds. That's what they do. They got their day gig and they make enough money to play the music they want to play. That's cool, and if I would have been a different person when I was younger, I might have done that. But I didn't know any better. I just didn't. I mean, and with that said, I mean, I had jobs other than music when I was young, but since I was 20 years old, music's all I've ever done, ever.
Which is a shame, and I guess that's what we're all out here trying to solve. I mean, I've been a full-time musician my whole life. I mean, before making that decision to become a musician, and again, modeling things after
I remember
you.
when you had a paper route.
Yeah, paper route, but modeling after my career after you and Rams and all these other folks that I could see who were doing it. I guess that's what we're trying to solve is like, how can we, it used to be a viable career, and why shouldn't being a full-time musician be a viable, it can be. It's how do we solve these problems?
That's a great question. I wish I had a great answer for it. I mean, you could say, well, if you move to New York, you move to L.A., it's the same everywhere. It's the same everywhere. I mean, I was just back in New York, and I hung out with some dear friends that I hadn't seen in such a long time. And I asked my friend Chris Bacchus, great saxophone player, are you busy? Work's just, that's pretty slow right now. He said, I had a gig last month. And then I have some other friends like my friend Mark, who works on Broadway. But, so he's busy with his full-time job. But that used to be like the jazz guys, they would do that thirdly or fourthly. That was only if they needed it, because there was work. And so how do you create work? Well, you have to create interest in the community and educate them on the music that you want to present so that they like it. You have to make it viable for them. And when I was a young musician, I certainly wasn't interested in that. I was only interested in me. What do I want to play? Well, there's a famous quote from Cannonball, isn't it? What do you say about?
I play 50% of what the audience wants to hear and 50% of what I think they need to hear.
I think that's a really good business model. Yeah, it makes sense. And so I still try to play the music I want to play. But I want to make it user-friendly if I can. And just showing people that it's not that big a deal. It's just having a conversation. It's about having fun, having a conversation with your friends on stage and the audience, and trying to draw them in with maybe as much your personality as you're playing, too, you know?
Do you feel, and this is not meant to be a loaded question, but I'm just curious on your opinions about this. I have my own opinions about this, but it feels like, and this is a massive topic of conversation with many facets to it, but it seems like in terms of, we mentioned the bar keeps getting set lower and lower and lower in many things. Do you feel like, from your opinion, with your vast experience in music education from all different levels. It seems like the bar keeps getting set lower and lower and lower for music students and music programs. And maybe I'm off the mark here.
No,
I don't think I am.
I think there's some truth to that. I think there's still highly talented students out there, but I think the expectations from programs, and this is, listen, I can tell you what I think, but I think it's about money. And the more people you get into a program, the easier it is for them to get into the program, the more money the school's going to make. So if you have a level where, only 10 kids are going to be able to play at that level, as opposed to a level that's, here, lower, where 100 kids can get in at that level, that's how the financial part of it works. And unfortunately, well, other people will tell you differently, but higher education has come to dollars. And it's too bad because it shouldn't be. But I think that's exactly why. Yep.
I agree. There's when you have some of these colleges, and we're not throwing any names under the bus, but you get, look at the books and what are the chancellors making, what are the administrators making, right. What is their salary versus, and the other thing that kills me is they'll let students pass with C&D work, knowing full well that the job economy is terrible, and they're like, all right, thanks for your money, here's all the student loan debt, right. We'll see you later, have a good one.
And then go out and do what? Well, I mean, if you were smart enough, I guess, musically, to get a music ed degree, you can probably go out and get a job teaching.
However, what's the situation like with the band programs? They might even get cut. You might not have a job.
That's true.
I mean, it's crazy to me.
It is true. But like a performance degree, well, that means you got to go get your master's, then your doctorate, and then if you're lucky enough, you could become an adjunct faculty member, and try to live on that. Good luck. Trust me.
Like I said, solving all the world's problems. Harumph, get off my lawn. No, but these are things that definitely I know they weigh on my mind. I'm sure they do with you and other students too, and important discussions that need to be had that a lot of people end up, that you talk about the playing part of it, but what about the actual, there's no reason in my mind, well, I mean, I guess, no, I don't mean to say it that way. The fact that it's so difficult to be a professional musician when the level of skill and talent and the work that you need to put in to play at a high level, and the fact that it's so hard to make a living like that, it baffles my mind.
It baffles my mind. And like someone called me to provide some music the other day, and I quoted them a price, and believe me, we're not talking about big numbers here. They said, well, that seems kind of high. I said, well, the price let me put it to you this way. I just had a plumber come to my house and replace a valve and one something under the sink, and it was $900. You want a duo, and I quoted you $400, and you want to tell me, and I'm going to be there for 3 hours, and you're telling me that that's expensive? I mean, no offense to plumbers, because I can't do it, but they can't do what I do either. And I think that I probably had to study a little longer. And no offense to plumbers. I mean, I wish I knew how to do it, but I'm just saying.
And maybe it's a U.S. thing. And every country, it's different country by country.
You just got back from, was it like that in France?
Well, it's different because they have remittance, and so that's its own can of worms. It's basically government assistance, and I might not know all the ins and outs, but basically, and the thing that many conversations I had with musicians over there, they were saying, well, you guys are working all the time over in the United States. I'm like, yeah, because we have to. For me, there's no safety net. I've been self-employed the majority of my life. There's no sick leave. There's no vacation. It's like you work or you don't get paid. You don't get paid, good luck.
Good luck. My son, who just recently started working for the Department of Ecology, for the government, calls me every, paid holiday, says, hey, Dad, guess what? I'm getting paid for a day off today. I'm like, I've never had a paid day off in my life. Never a one.
Well, like I said, we're solving the world's problems here. I think that's.
You were saying about the musicians in France.
Yeah, so they have remittance. So it's basically like social program, social assistance, where if you work too much, you get penalized because you're working. You have like X amount, and I'm sure Google search can explain this better than what I'm doing right now. But you basically have government assistance, and if you work over a certain amount and makes too much money, then you get penalized on the assistance part of it.
So you have to pay back to them, so they spread it up. I see. Interesting.
So
Interesting.
basically, if you work too much, you get in trouble for making more money than you should be making.
Give me a ticket to France.
So it's I don't know. Every country has its problems.
I guess, yeah.
Its pluses and minuses. So, anyways, yeah, I don't know. It's
So yeah, but in regards to how do you build and a place, and I think, because I've played, listen, I've had my day in the sun, if that's what you want to call it, and played so many gigs in my life, and it's great. So, again, I think if there's one thing left that I'd like to try to do, if I have any say in it whatsoever, I don't know if to do it or not, is just make a bigger space for more musicians to be able to go and play and make a living. I don't know how that looks, or I've thought about it a lot. And I've been on every other side of music except for maybe that. And maybe it's just about going out and talking to people that that have resources and try to get them to get involved, with that sort of thinking. That's maybe part of it. But I think it's got to stem from musicians that, don't have to be necessarily out there working every day or have a little more stability as opposed to an up and young coming musician, yeah.
I was having a conversation last night with some musicians on a gig, and we were talking about, and again, I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus here. We were talking about, it was a well-known high school here in the Pacific Northwest that was competing at essentially Ellington. And, in order for those that aren't aware, essentially Ellington is a very prestigious jazz festival competition every year that you have to apply for. And this is one of the schools here from the area here, and one of the players from that band that could solo really well and learned all the stuff just for that concert. But then when they go to sit in at a local gig, can't make heads or tails of like simple material.
Right.
So I guess it's like, well, you're teaching them. It's almost like classical music in a sense. You learn how to play this one thing, but you're not really learning the nuts and bolts of the foundational part of this music, which is improvisation,
Right,
spontaneous composition.
They learn to play the Jimmy Hamilton clarinet solo, note for note, which is cool. That's part of learning. Or the Paul Gonsalves solo, and because they're reading it, they'd be better off saying, okay, but you can't have any music. You got to learn this by ear. That would make more sense, and then take that solo. Now give me a 3-2-5-1 licks from that, and now put it in all 12 keys, and now put it into this tune. And that if they taught it that way, that would make more sense. So these younger players could go out and actually, set up and play maybe only a couple choruses. You don't have to be able to play 100 choruses. Play a couple good choruses,
We're at that time. If anybody has questions for myself or Tracy, feel free to put them in the comments, and we will do our best to address them either in real time or after the fact. Are there any comments or questions? Excuse me. No, I'll keep barraging Tracy with questions then. I want to jump back a minute and want to go back to more for historical purposes, going back to Red Kelly's. Yep. When you first started hanging out at Red's, who were some of the musicians on the scene that were regulars around, either playing with Red or would come around and be in
it's hard to
the
remember all their
periphery?
names. Jack Percival was there a lot. Piano player. Him and Red were on Harry James Band together. Neil Friel, who not many people know about. He was an amazing trumpet player who would go out on the road and live in those days the road lifestyle, which was not the healthiest, and then come back and kind of get his act together. And but he was an amazing trumpet player from the area. Chuck and Jan Stentz were there a lot. Jan sang with Red a lot, and she was great. She was really great. One of my favorite people. It's hard to believe all these people are gone. Doesn't make me feel too good. You're next, kid. You're next. Um, um, God, I'm so Med Flory when he's in town would go in. So many people. It's just hard to remember them all. But I remember in particular Neil Friel and Jack Percival were there a lot. I can't remember who usually played drums. I can't remember. But those guys were staples there. Yeah.
I remember when I first started watching you play at Drake's and sometimes at Kelly's, you guys would have Clarence Acox would come down and play a fair amount.
Used to come
with
and
you
play
guys.
a lot. Yeah. I don't know. He wasn't at Reds a lot, but during that time, Clarence was playing a lot of drums. Yeah. Good drummer, great drummer, man. Yeah.
Before I proceed with more questions, any questions? Okay.
Why not?
Yeah, why not? People like, turn it off. You mentioned the road, and we talked a little bit about the iron lung, as you lovingly referred to the bus.
Mm-hmm.
What was a typical day in the life, like when you were on the road, on the bus touring? Like, I understand, like, just trying to eat well and sleep and all that provides doing that now in a house in America is a challenge. But on a bus with all these characters and personalities, what was a typical day in the life? What did it look like?
Well, so if you're lucky, you have to get to spend the night in a hotel room. You wake up maybe at 10 o'clock, and get to the bus, check out, get to the bus. Maybe you got up early but you were up late the night before because you were playing. So getting up early wasn't always an option. You make it to the bus, on time, because if you were late for the bus, even 1 minute would cost you a case of beer. And they would stop immediately so you could get that case of beer. And then you would travel, maybe 4, 5, 6 hours. Get off the bus. I was on the setup crew. I'd get the bandstand set up. I'd get the sound system set up. Get into your suit, warm up, play the gig, and then maybe that night you're on the bus all night. And that's where the shenanigans took place, poker games all night. And, yeah. You can imagine the rest, I'm sure, without me stating. But.
Well, you said there's a hotel. What if there's no hotel? Well, basic things like a shower. What about a shower? How does that work?
So, if you were checking today, they had this thing called band room. So we're talking about 20 guys. So, in my case, Buddy Murrow would buy like a band room. One room for 20 guys to deal with, all of that. And, not so much fun. This is why I started playing golf, because I didn't want to be in the band room, so I'd just go out and find a golf course and try to go hit the ball as best I could.
And then you could take a shower at the club.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay. These are just things like when we tour, these are logistics.
We used to call that, the bus, the term home sweet home? Home seat home. Yeah. So you have a cooler, you have it out in the aisle, you'd be stretched out, with the pillow palace, trying to sleep. Meanwhile, if someone had to use the bathroom, they'd be crawling over the top of it's a young man's game.
Yeah, okay. So, laundry. How do you do your laundry?
You have to, when you get a day off, you got to call a cab. When they used to have cabs, Uber didn't exist. And you have to go find a laundromat. Or if you were lucky, the hotel might have laundry machines. But, yeah, it was hard.
So these are
very resourceful.
Yeah, these are things you have to plan for. Like I was thinking about this conversation. Like, yeah, it's not just playing the gig and getting on the bus.
No.
There's life.
That gig's the easy part. Yeah. And there was guys that because we weren't exactly paid a lot, so guys would and they would always stay on the bus. We call them the bus people, just to save money on the hotel room, because they needed to send the money home. Anything, little hot plates to make food, because, eating in restaurants is great, but, it's, at the end of the week, you get your paycheck and then it's gone. Just living.
What would be the equivalent, hourly wage do you figure that you were making back then versus now?
When I first joined the band, I want to say a week's pay, when I first joined, $450 a week. And so expenses, if you were in a hotel 3 to 4 nights a week, that's going to be, at that time, because there was always a cap, and then Buddy would cover the rest, 100, I would say. Food's going to be at least another, you can't eat for a week on less than those, even 150, 200. You got to take a cab, go do your laundry, got to live some kind of life on a day off. You got to, you know, the money was gone. And I think by the time I left, maybe I was making, I don't even remember, $750. But all I know is this. And there were guys that were very frugal. I was not one of them. But even, you know, to be able to save any money to send home was very, very, very difficult. So, oh, wow, you were on the road. Oh, yeah, I was on the road. All right. Yeah, well, you know, the musical part was the reason you were on the road. It wasn't to make
the
money.
education. It was an education.
Yep.
Yeah. Almost out of time. Any questions? Oh, no. Okay. So then, what was the question I wanted to ask you? Laundry, food. Yeah. So the dollar equivalent. When you got off the road, did you have some savings built up?
Not much.
Not much.
Not much.
And we talked about this before, but the reason that you wanted to get off the road is just zombie-like status.
Zombie-like status. My body was just had enough. Well, I mean, to be honest, if you want me to be honest about it, I was, you know, I knew I needed to get off the road, and I didn't know what I was going to do, and so I was suffering from depression. And I mean, my body felt like I was dying, seriously. I mean, I just wanted to sleep. My body ached all the time. I thought I'd go to doctors every day. Something's wrong. So finally, I just had to get off the road. And then I got back home, and I'm still going to doctors. They're like, nothing's nothing. I had every test known to man done. You name it, I had the test. So finally, the doctor said, well, we got to you know, examine the mental and emotional part of this. And, you know, so I went to a clinical psychologist. He diagnosed me as being depressed. I said, of course I'm depressed. I feel like I'm dying. And, you know, seriously. And so they treated me with medication. And I remember after about 2.5 weeks, I was still feeling the same. Now I'm really getting scared because I'm thinking, see, they're just not finding what's wrong, something wrong. But then just about maybe a week later, I'll never forget it. I woke up one morning, and I felt like my old self. I was like, wow, it was all here? And I took the pills for a few more days, and then I just threw them away. But without that, though, you could have never told me it was, and so take care of your mental health. Yeah.
So when you were teaching 90 students a week, were you back on the pills?
No, but I should have been. No, yeah, I'm just built for that. I don't sit very well. You know, I just don't. Yeah, although it's getting a little easier these days, you know, as you get older. You know, I never used to think about age as anything at all, but with everything that's happened, you know, with the loss of many family members from my family this year and friends, I'm starting to understand age a little bit better. And not in a bad way, but just much different, yeah.
Well, we need to wrap up here. Trace, as usual, it's been a pleasure
Thank you, man.
chopping it up with you.
Yeah.
We're going to take a very short break here and then get reconfigured and get ready for the concert. And so thanks for joining us today, wherever you're joining us from. If you have any questions that you think of after the fact, put them in the comments, and we'll do our best to get to them later. And, yeah, thanks so much for your support, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.